Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. To everybody here and everyone who's on Zoom. No, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. I didn't know there was water. No, it's fine. No, it's good. Thanks. No, it's great. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. We began last week. We started with the first scene, so to speak, in Megillas Rus. We pointed out that there's really there's 4 prakim in Sefer Rus, but it's really divided up into 8 different themes. And we dealt with the first theme, which was really Elimelech and Naomi moving to Moab and the effects of that with Elimelech dying and Machlon and Kilion dying. We spoke at length last week about the question of whether Machlon and Kilion married Rus and Orpah, were they converted or not. That was like our main focus for last week. This week we're going to try to make a push to complete Perek Aleph. That will be our goal, to complete Perek Aleph, which is really the next 2 scenes. It's the scene of Naomi and Rus and Orpah making their way back to Eretz Yisrael, and then actually arriving there. So we're going to begin with Pasuk Vav. We're going to start on Pasuk Vav. Okay. Answer this week or no? No. Right, to making sure. All right. So we're going to start with Pasuk Vav. So Vatakam hi v'kaloseha. So she, Naomi, got up, v'kaloseha, and her daughters-in-law, Vatashav mistei Moab, and she returned from the field of Moab. Kisham'a b'stei Moab, because it was heard in the fields of Moab, the word had got out, which actually the Malbim says, how did word get out? So he says that the famine had ended, and he says the way word got out was that people were bringing food. People were coming from Eretz Yisrael to Moab, to like merchants, to sell food. So she found out that the famine was over. Kishama b'stei Moab, she had heard, Ki fakad Adonai es amo, that Hashem had remembered his people, laseis lahem lachem, to provide for them bread. So just to point out one thing on this pasuk, you notice how many people do we have involved in this trip here? The trip involves 3 people, right? It's he v'kalosel. Well, right. It's Orpah and Rus, the 2 daughters-in-law, and Naomi. The beginning of the pasuk says vatakam, right? That she got up, and it's singular. If you contrast that to the beginning of the Sefer, where they leave Eretz Yisrael to go to Moab, and it says there that Elimelech is leaving, right? And he's bringing with him whom? He's bringing with him Naomi and his 2 sons. So the Mefarshim point out, earlier there's like a trip, 4 people going, right? And it's phrased in the singular because Elimelech is like driving the ship, so to speak. He's the engine, he's the decision maker. And he's choosing to leave Eretz Yisrael, which we talked about last week, to put up his hands. He's not helping the people. He's leaving Eretz Yisrael. And now Naomi is, so to speak, like the tikkun of that, right? She's the one now. She before was a passive character. Now she's the driving force. Vatakam, she is the driving force, and she gets up and she leads Rus and Orpah back to Eretz Yisrael. Now it's not so clear why Rus and Orpah are going with her, right? We all know the end of the story, so we say they're following her because they're going to either stay with her or not stay, right? But at this point, we don't know that. We don't know why they're going with her. It could just be that they're escorting her, that they don't want her to be alone, to be traveling alone. We don't know what they're thinking. It just says they're going with her, but we don't know exactly what the thought process is at this point. Okay, Vateitze min hamakom. Vateitze min hamakom, and they leave the place, asher hayas sashama, that they were there, meaning they left Moab, ushtei kaloseha ima, and with her 2 daughters-in-law. Vatelachna baderech, and they begin making the trip on the road, lashuv el Eretz Yehuda, to return back to the land of Yehuda. Okay, pasuk ches. Vatomer Naomi l'shtei chaloseha. So Naomi says to her 2 daughters-in-law, right? Now, this might be a proof to that, right? At what point does she say this to them? After they've what? It just says they went on the road to return to Eretz Yehuda. So she doesn't say it at the beginning of the trip. She says it now. It sounds like they're approaching Eretz Yehuda. They're really getting close to Israel. Now she says something to them. So perhaps that is a proof that in the beginning they were just trying to escort her, and now she sees that it's kind of pushing further, and she says, like, what's going on? Why are you continuing this journey with me? So she says, Lechna shovna, go back and return. Isha leves ima, each woman to her mother's house. Ya'as Adonai imachem chesed. Hashem should do kindness for you. Ka'asher asisem im hamesim ve'imadi. Just as you have done for the Mesim. So who are the dead ones? Which people died? Okay, the sons, right? Okay, good. So the son, so not clear who she's referring to. The most important say it's the son. She's saying, just as you were so kind and you were such good daughter-in-laws to my sons, right? Kasher asisem im hamesim v'imadi. Just as you've acted so kindly with my sons in the past and with me until now, so too Hashem should provide for you and be good to you. Yeah.
That's a question. So when they return to your mother's house, so it's implying that Eglon was already killed?
Okay, that's a good question. Just to repeat for the people on Zoom, the question was like this: it's if you observe that's a good hara that it says in Pasuk Ches, return to your mother's house, not to your father's house. So the question was, does that imply that the father was dead? Now the father here is Eglon, the king of Moab, right? That's Chazal say that Rus and Arpa were the daughters of Eglon. So it's possible that Eglon was already dead at this point. It's one possibility. The other possibility is that they were from two wives, right? So she's saying each one should go back. She doesn't say leves avichen to your father's house or leves imachen to your mother's house. She says isha leves ima, right? Which means each woman to their respective mother's house, which could mean that she's implying that they have two different mothers, right? Eglon is the father, but from two different women. That's also a possibility. Could be either one. Pasuk Tes. Yitain Adonai lachem umetzena menucha. So Hashem should give to you and provide for you. You should all find menucha, peace. Isha base Isha. How so? Each woman finding a home with Isha, with her husband. Meaning you should go return back home and hopefully you'll find the husband and get remarried and move on with life. And now the key point, Vatishak lahen, and she kisses them, Vatisena kolan vativkena, and they lift up their voices and they cried. So we're going to come back to this Vatishak. There's a lot of discussion about the fact of the kissing going on. This one sometimes is overlooked. At this point, it's Naomi kissing both of them, kissing Rus and Orpah, and everyone starts to cry. So Pasuk Yud, Vatomar Nala, and they said to her, Ki itach nashuv la'amech, with you we will return to your nation. So what's interesting here is that who is talking? Vatomar Nala, they said to her, Ki itach nashuv, we will return. So this is not just Rus talking at this point. At this point, sounds like Rus and Naomi. They're both talking, and they're both implying that what? That they're willing to return back with her. Sorry, thank you. Rus and Arpa, I apologize. Yeah. Sorry, Rus and Arpa are speaking both to Naomi, and they're both saying, we want to go back to join you. So it sounds like they're both in on it at this point.
Yeah, so basically, like, I wasn't out past year, but you said basically it was a question if they actually converted, but wouldn't we be used as a proof they didn't because it said your nation, not our nation?
Yes. Okay. So okay. Good. The question was this pasuk, and we're going to see a few pasukim here where we can now start to pick apart and see proofs in both directions. So we're pointing out, what's your name again? Tzvi. Sorry. So Tzvi's pointing out that very good. It says we will go back to we want to return to your nation. That implies, that does sound like it's not them. It's like they're making a distinction between them and her, right? So that would imply, seem to support. That's the Ibn Ezra. Sorry, I apologize. That's Rashi and the Malbim who say that they were not converted. They were not converted at this point. That would seem to imply that. They're saying, we want to join you. Now, the question is, when they say, we want to join you, what does that mean? So if you would have asked me, I would have said, it's like what Tzvi's saying. It's like their way of saying, we want to become part of the people, right? The Malbim says it could be they're just saying, we want to go live with you. We want to go live. We don't want to live in Moab anymore. We want to go live in Israel. But we're not saying anything about conversion at this point. It's not clear. Okay, it could go either way. Pasuk Yud Aleph. So now Naomi pushes back a second time. Okay, she's already said one time, Pasuk Ches, Lech Shovna, go return. And now the second time, Atomer Naomi, and Naomi says, Shovna benosai, return my daughters. Lama selachna imi. Why are you going with me? Ha'od li banim b'me'ai. Do I have any more sons in my stomach, in my insides? V'hayu lachem lenashim, that they would get married to you. I don't have any sons left that they would be able to get married to you. Shovna benosai. I'm going to read one more pasuk and then explain it. Shovna benosai. Return, my daughters. Lechna, and go. Why? Two reasons. Number one, ki zakanti mihios leish. Because I have become old. Mihios leish. I'm too old to get a husband, to be married. Ki amarti yesh li tikva. For had I said, even if I were to have some kind of tikva, hope, gam hayisi halayla leish, even if I were tonight to be together with a man, v'gam yoladati banim, and even if I were to have children, halahin tisaberna ad asher yigdalu, would you, tisaberna is related to the word like we say in Ashrei, einechol elecha yisaberu, right? It means to like look, right? Einechol elecha yisaberu. All the eyes of Hashem are looking to you with this great deep hope, right? Of waiting for lechem. So she says, halahin tisaberna, would you wait with this great hope ad asher yigdalu, until the children get older? So first of all, it's not like I don't have any kids, right? Second of all, I'm not getting married. Third of all, even if I were to do that, it's going to be forever that you're going to wait to be married to them. So a few points here. We'll stop in the middle of this pasuk and just point out a few things. So there's a Rashi here, and I'll explain it outside. It's a Rashi in pasuk Yud Beis. It's not too complicated, but it requires a little bit of focus here to understand what Rashi's saying, and it gets back to our discussion last week about conversion or not, so we'll add it in again. So she says what? Naomi says, I'm too old to have any children, any sons to give you, to let you marry them, right? So, and I'm not going to have, I don't have any more children in my stomach, okay? So the Malbim right away says, he says that doesn't mean she actually is saying, I would let you, like if I have a kid, I'll let you marry them. It's just her way of saying, Malbim actually says, she's saying it like poetically. She's saying like, I don't have any kids. I'm not hiding any kids in my stomach. I don't have them behind the freight. You know, there's nothing left. Just go back and go live your life back in Moab. So Rashi says the following idea. Rashi says, what Nami's saying is like this. Nami says, she says, I'm too old to have children. And she says, and that's important because if I implication being, if I were to have children, Rashi believes, she's saying, I would allow you to marry them. If I could get married and have children, I would let you marry those children. Okay? I'm too old to get married and start a family. But if I were to do that, you guys would be first line. I'd let you marry my sons. So there's a point here that Rashi makes regarding the halacha of Yibum. Okay? So how does Yibum work? So the Torah says, Ki yeshvu achim yachdav. When you have brothers who are living together, umeis achad mehem, and one of them dies, ubein ein lo, and they don't have a child. So it says that the wife of the deceased should marry the existing brother. That's the concept of Yibum. Okay. The Gemara points out and says that Yibum only applies to any brothers who are alive at the time of the death of the brother who dies. So Reuven and Shimon are two brothers. Reuven dies. If Shimon is alive at the time of the death of Reuven, Shimon would marry Reuven's widow. That makes sense so far? Right?
100% makes sense.
Really? Michael, good? Okay. No, the next part's going to be tricky. Okay. So the Gemara says, Yibum only applies when the two brothers, when they were alive at the same time, but not in the following scenario. If Reuven were to die, and then he has a younger brother born, and his wife wants to wait 20 years or 15 years to marry that brother, that marriage can't take place. That can't happen. This is what the Gemara calls Eshes Ach, the wife of the brother, Shelo Haya Ba'olamo, the brother who was not alive at the time of the death of the older brother. There's no Yibum in that scenario because the pasuk says Ki yeshvu achim yachdav. The brothers have to be living together in order for there to be Yibum. But if one brother is born following the death of the first brother, no Yibum can take place. Even if the woman is willing to wait, Yibum is not allowed at that point. Yibum is not allowed. In fact, the marriage would be prohibited because she can't marry her husband's brother. That's a good question. No, I'm pretty sure that the Gemara talks about that. I'm pretty sure the Gemara says it has to be yachtav. It has to be like in the world. So even if the conception, I think, would not help. I think I have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure It does not help. Anyone can question that on Zoom? No? I think that's true. I'll look it up after. So Rashi says the following thing. What does Nami say? Nami says, I'm too old to have children. Because if I were to have children, just go ahead and marry someone else. Because if I were to have children, I would give them to you. In Yibum. So Rashi says, whoa, like flag on the field, 10 yards. You can't do that. Right? How can she say, if I were to have children, I would give them to you? Any children which would be subsequently born to Naomi would not be allowed to marry Rus and Orpah because they were not alive at the time of the death of Machlon and Kilion. So Rashi says, well, they were not converted when they married. Machlon and Kilion married Rus and Orpah before they converted. So it was not a legal marriage, meaning it wasn't halachically valid. And because it wasn't halachically valid, any child which Naomi could have could marry Machlon and Kilion.
But then basically, why did Tov have to do the Lisa?
Okay, good. We're going to get to that. Excellent. Okay, good. I'm trying to pretend like we don't know the end of the story. But that's a fantastic question. Okay, the question was here, if that's true, right? So then why later on was there like a chalitza done in order for someone to back out? So we're going to deal with that hopefully either next week or the following week. Okay, so hopefully we'll come back now. Okay, that's a great question, right? That's a question on Rashi. But Rashi at this point, just to observe that, right? Rashi's saying, you see it's a proof that they were not converted because Naomi says, if I were to have children, I would let you marry them. And that wouldn't be a violation of Eishes Ach Shlo Haya Ba'olamo. So Rashi says it must be that they're not converted. The question on that is going to be, like Tzvi's pointing out, later on it seems to be they're really going through like a procedural yibum, in order to make sure that everything's, fair and square. And here Rashi's just saying the whole thing was not real yibum anyway because they were never married to Machlon and Kilion in the first place, halachically. So Rashi points that out here. Okay. So going back, so I'll read Pasuk Yud Beis one more time into Yud. She says, Shovan of Nosai, go back, my daughters. Lechna, go. Ki zakanti miyos lish. I am too old to be married. Ki amarti yeshli tikva. Even if I were to have hope. Gam ha'isi halayla lish. Even if I were tonight to be married, v'gam yaladati banim, and have children, halahein tisaberna. Would you wait for them? Ad asher yigdalu, until they get older. Halahein te'agena. Would you become agunos? Right, that's one pshat. Would you become an aguna? Rashi actually says the word te'agena is not from aguna. Right, aguna is a woman who can't marry because of any factor essentially, but who's like stuck, so to speak. Rashi said it's not related to the word igun, but he says it's related to the word ug. Right, what's an ug? An ug is a circle. Right, by Choni Hamagil, the person who drew, it says, Ug Uga va'amad b'socha. He drew the circle and he stood inside the circle and he said to Hashem, right, make there be rain, I'm not going to leave the circle. So Rashi says it comes from the word Ug, to draw a circle, meaning Te'agena, he says, is a word of like, I'm encircling myself, like I'm constricting myself. There's like a circle around and I'm trapped inside. Now, it seems to me like Aguna is the same principle, but Rashi points it out. He says, it's the word Ug Uga, from a circle, it's not the word Igun. So whatever it is, the point is, she says, do you want to be stuck? Levilti hayos leish. You're not going to be able to marry anyone. Al benosai. No, don't do this, my daughters. Kimar li me'od mikem. It is very difficult for me. It is very, very bitter for me, mikem, on account of you. Like it's hard for me to watch you like this. Ki yatsa v'yad Adonai. Despite the fact that yatsa b'yad Hashem, God has been after me. I've suffered big time through God. Right, I lost my husband. We lost all our money, everything. Right, I lost my children. But despite all that, Marli Miken Ma'od, it's difficult for me even to see you in this situation. So why don't you go back and move on with your lives? Now, there's a basic question here, which is very interesting. Naomi says what? Naomi's whole point here is like you're going to be if you live with me, you're going to be stuck. So go back to Moab. Well, why would they be stuck with her? They could marry whoever they want. See the question, right? It's very odd. She seems to be saying like it would either be my family or you're done. Well, if there were kids in her family, then you could say maybe it's some kind of yibum thing, or according to Rashi, it's not. But there's some kind of thing like sticking with her family. But she's like, just go back and live in Moab because I wouldn't want you to be stuck forever. Well, what do you mean stuck forever? Just come with me, you'll just marry some good Jewish guy. Either they already converted or you'll convert now, and So the Mefarshim on the page don't really discuss this, but this is going to come up later, and this is something that's not really so clear in the whole Sefer. But it seems like that this is going on. Is that we discussed last week, for people who weren't here, just in short, we talked about there was this whole question about whether David HaMelech was Jewish or not, right? We pointed out the Gemara where there was a question of, because he comes from Rus and Rus came from Moab, and we weren't supposed to marry anyone who converts from Moab. So the Gemara says, well, that's only a problem of marrying a Moavi man, but not a Moavi woman. So, and therefore Rus was fine. So some people say that, and you see that there maybe was, the fact that the Gemara has this whole back and forth, there was this whole argument that people were questioning David's validity. So you see that halacha was not so clear, apparently. Or else there would have been no discussion, right? There's this whole thing on the battlefield. Is he Jewish? Is he not Jewish? And they're arguing about it. And Shaul HaMelech says, would somebody just go finally ask the post, go into the Beis Medrash and ask someone. And someone goes in and says, there was a psak from Shmuel HaNavi, which we suggested might be the Megillah of Rus itself, is the psak that Shmuel HaNavi writes the Megillah to prove David's lineage to be Jewish. So the point is that whole issue seems to not be so clear. So it could be that what she's saying, don't know for sure, it could be what she's saying is, we accept that in my family, right? Because that's going to be the whole thing that Boaz, sorry to fast forward, right? But Boaz is part of her family. Like, we apparently did accept that and understand that it was limited to Moavi men, but not women. But she says, if apparently this halacha was not so clear, and if you're going to come live in Israel, you really might be stuck forever. Because there's no one left in my family, and people don't really accept this. So you're going to be labeled as not Jewish, basically. You're not marriageable. Okay. So what happens then? Pasuk Yodalid. Vatisena kolon vativkena. So then they lift up their voices again and they cry, Ode, more. Vatishak arpa lachamusa. Arpa kisses her mother-in-law. Verus davkaba. And Rus clings to her. This is the famous line that Arpa kisses and Rus clings to her. The Malbim says she's kissing her like it's a farewell kiss. But I heard a nice idea, which I think on a deeper level, perhaps what's going on is, what does Arpa do? What did Naomi first do to them? Back in Pasuk Tes, what does Naomi do to Rus and Arpa? The first time she tries to part with them, what does she do? She kisses them. Right? So perhaps it's not clear what her motivation was. But if her motivation there was to try to kiss, she's like sending them away, but she's almost like imparting herself into them, trying to maintain some sort of connection. And what happens? Arpa basically gives it back, so to speak. Right? It's like, here's your kiss back. Right? She kisses her back. It's like done. And Rus, though, wants to maintain it. And Rus holds on. Now, the question, again, how to view Naomi here is something that's going to go back to what we discussed last week. How do we view Naomi? Is Naomi throwing away her Judaism, or is she just not choosing to become Jewish at this point? Right? And that's a big difference, right? If you view it, well, that's what we discussed last week. If you ask Rashi, sorry, did I keep saying? I apologize. I keep speaking. I'm sorry. Thank you. No, please call it out. Thank you. I'm sorry. How do we view Arpa? Right? How is Arpa to be viewed? Right? Is Arpa leaving Judaism, or is she just choosing not to go further? Right? So this gets back to what we discussed last week. Were Rus and Arpa already converted? If they already converted, so oh, good. Okay, so that's also a possibility, right? It could have been like a conversion that's like on shaky ground, So if it's kind of like on shaky ground, so then it's not necessarily, Arpa's kind of like saying, actually, I'm not really game. I'm not really game, in which case Rus, it kind of shifts how we view Rus, right? Because now Rus is saying I could leave, but I don't want to. If the flip side, if you view Arpa if you view them as Jewish, right? And Arpa is like throwing it all away, so to speak, right? Which would cast her in a much more negative light. Not as a villain, but, negative. So then if you look at Rus, it's not as extravagant, right? Because what's Rus really doing? She's choosing not to throw it all away, but she's already Jewish. So depending how we view their status, again, that's again not clear in Chazal, Like, how do we view, is Arpa to be viewed very negatively because she threw it all away? Or is she just saying, no, this is not a life that I want. I'm not Jewish. I don't want to pursue this. It would have been a lot. So I'm going to say something to continue the thing you're pointing out about Arpa. So, it's very interesting because it's going to require going back here, but this is really a fascinating idea that I heard, which is just interesting. It's interesting to see how some themes run themselves through Tanakh and they play out here. Where was it? Okay, I don't have a family tree, but I brought this. It's funny. I was going to say this. I was thinking to draw it up on a paper, and I came home. My daughter in second grade today is learning this. She's just started. I said, "Oh, can I bring this? I'm teaching class." She was all excited and bring her chart. Okay, so if we go back for a moment to we're going to go back and then we're going to trace it through a little bit of stories that in Chumash, and we're going to come out through Rus in a neat way. If you go back to the first time Avram Avinu is introduced in the Torah, so Avram comes from Terach. Okay, I'll try to do this slowly so you can follow. The Torah says Terach has 3 children, right? He has Avram, okay, we know about, Nachor, okay, and Haran. Avram, Nachor, and Haran. So Haran we know about. How do we know about him? It's not in the Torah, right? It's in the famous Medrash that Rashi brings. What's the famous story with Haran? That Avram's father brings them to Nimrod, and he said he's going to throw them in the fire, in short, right? And what happens? And he says, which side are you on? And Haran says, nah, I'm going to wait around and see what happens, right? So he throws Avram in, and Avram says, oh, I don't care. I go with Hashem no matter what. He goes in. Avram goes in. He comes out. Shalom Yisrael, right? If Haran says, oh, I'm with him, right? Sign me up. Haran goes in. Haran is burned to death, right? That's the story of Haran. So the Maharal says a neat idea. Maharal says, Maharal always points these things out in terms of like how like names have deeper meanings. Like he always comes up with these neat ideas like this. So he says, what's Haran? Hey, Reish Nun. Okay, 3 letters. Hey, Reish Nun. So let's start with Hey, right? There's 3 letters, and each letter represents a different numeric category of the aleph base, right? Hey is in the single digits, right? Reish is part of the hundreds category, and Nun is part of the tens category, right? Hey is 5, Nun is 50, and Reish is 200. Each letter in his name represents a different numeric category of the aleph base. Okay. So now see if you can follow this. Hey is the middle of the single digits, right? Aleph through Yud. Hey is right in the middle. Okay. Let's skip to the end. It's easy, right? What's Nun? Nun is right in the middle of the middle digits. It's 50, right? Goes to 100. Now, what about Reish? So what are the 100 digits in the aleph base? So it goes, Kuf is 100, Reish is 200, Shin is 300, and Taf is 400. So what is Reish really? Reish is the middle letter of the hundreds of the aleph base unit, right? Because there's 100, 200, 300, 400. So half, so to speak, the middle, right? Half is 200. So Haran's name, right? Hey, half of the tens. Reish, half of the hundreds. Nun, half of the Hey, half of the single digits. Reish, half of the hundreds. And Nun, half of the double digits. So Maral has a different idea. He says the concept is Haran is like in the middle, right? He's in the middle. He's on the line, right? He's hedging his bet, right? Where do you stand, Haran? You going into the fire or not? See, he's not sure, right? Do you side with Avraham or not? So Avraham goes in. Oh, I'm on his side, right? He doesn't make the decision himself. He kind of lets the circumstances decide for him. Okay, so the Maral doesn't say that part. This idea I heard from someone named Rabbi Yaakov Trump. He's a rabbi in New York. So he took this Maral and he developed it further. So he says Haran is the middleman. He's on the fence. So okay, now let's take this further. Haran has 3 children. Haran has Lot, Sarah, and Milcah. Lot, Sarah, and Milcah. Okay. So let's start with Lot. Okay. So Lot is the byproduct of Haran, of this person in the middle ground. What happens? Avram is told to leave his family and go down to Mitzrayim. And who does he take with him? Lot. Lot goes along, right? So he's like clinging to Avram, right? And what happens? They come back from Mitzrayim, And Rashi points out, or Chazal say that they were in Mitzrayim, and Lot kept his mouth shut. He didn't rat and say, with Sarah and Avram, and they come out of Mitzrayim. And the next parak is what happens. They're living in Canaan, and there's this problem between Avraham and Lot and the shepherds, right? And Avram says, this is not going to work out between us, right? So Lot is faced with this decision, so to speak, right? Am I with Avraham? Am I going to make this work? Or am I not with Avraham? Like, how do I really side, right? And what does Lot do? Lot says, off. He's off to Sodom, right? So Lot, again, following this haran, like this decision of, am I siding with the Avraham side of the family, or am I parting? Lot parts. Now, if you take it to the next generation, so Lot's other child, right? Haran's other child. Haran has Lot, and Sarah, and Milcah. Okay. Who comes out of Milcah? So the end of Parshas Vayera, after the Akedah, it says, right, Avram is told, Milcah, is that it? Right. Milcah has, and it lists a bunch of children of Milcah. And one of those children is Besuel. Good. And who comes out of Besuel? Rivka. Right? So what happens? Eliezer goes to get Rivka, right? And he gives her all the stuff and everything, and she takes Eliezer back to her house, right? And Eliezer's retelling the whole story. Who's he telling it to? He's telling it to her father, to Besuel, who comes from Milcah, who comes from Haran, right? And he says, this whole thing, and Hashem made it's clear it's from Hashem. Now Hashem Yatzadavar, it's got to be, And what do they say? They say, we're not sure. We're not sure which way to go. Right? Again, I don't know. Do we go? Do we not? What's the deal? Call her and ask her. So they ask Rivka, and which way does Rivka go? Rivka makes the choice. Rivka goes, says, I'm siding with the Avram side of the family. And then it runs through in the next door as well, right? Because what happens? Yaakov goes to Lavan's house, right? And Lavan comes from who? Milcah, who comes from who? Haran. So Yaakov is there with Lavan. And Hashem comes to Yaakov, and Hashem says to Yaakov, it's time to leave. You had all these children, Laman's messing you over, get out of here, go. And Yaakov says, like a wise man, right? He says, I have to ask my wives, right? Go ask the wives. So he says, Vayikra Yaakov, Hasadeh, right? He goes out to the field and asks them, come here. He says, we got to go. Are you staying here with this side of the family, or are we leaving? We're ditching, we're going. So again, here there's this decision. Where the fork in the road, where do you side? And they say, we're going. So now what happens here? You have Rus and Orpah. Where do they come from? They are from Moab. Right? Rus and Orpah are from Moab. Where does Moab come from? So Moab is the product of Lot and his daughters. Right? So here we go again. It's this, which is again coming from Haran. So here's this fork in the road. Where do you stand? Where do you stand? Vatishaklan, she kisses them. Where are you? Are you with us? Or you're not? This is the moment of choice. Where do you stand? With the Avraham line of the family or not? And it splits, right? So Rus goes and Arpa the other way. And that's this crucial turning point. Okay, let's try to finish up a few of the psukim here. Pasuk moving on. Pasuk Tezayin. Vatomer Rus al tifki ibi. Rus says, don't Pasuk Tezvav. Vatomer. And then Naomi says, Hine shava yivemtech. Your sister-in-law. Rus, your sister-in-law, Arpa, your sister-in-law, she went back, Elama, to her nation, Ve'el Eloheha, and to her gods. Shuvi, return, Acharei Vimtech, after your sister-in-law. Go follow her. Vatomer Rus, pasuk tes zayin. And then Rus says, Al tifki ibi, don't push me, la'azveich, to leave you, lashuv me'acharayach, to return back and at home. Ki el asher telchi elech. Where you go, I will go. Uva asher talini alin. And where you sleep, I will sleep. Amech ami. My nation is your nation. Ve'lohayach Elohai. V'asher tamusi amus. Where you die, I will die. V'sham ekaver. And I will be buried with you. Ko ya'aseh Adonai li v'cho Yosef. So should God do to me. Ki hamaves yafrid bein ve'uvenech. Because only death will part between you, right? Until death do we part, right? I'm with you no matter what. So the Malbim points out something interesting here. We're all familiar with the Yud Gimel Ikrim not by heart necessarily, but the Rambam has Yud Gimel Ikrim, right? The 13 principles of faith, okay? Where he basically says, like, these are the 13 main, principles that a Jew has, that basically the rest of the Torah and everything else is basically built on these 13 core principles. Yud Gimel Ikrim of the Rambam, the Ani Ma'amad. So there was somebody named Rabbi Yosef Alba. Okay, Rabbi Yosef Alba wrote a sefer called the Sefer Ha'ikarim, which was like a philosophy sefer, where he basically argued on the Rambam on many points. And he felt that there were not 13 Ikrim, but rather there were 3 main Ikrim. He said there were 3 main Ikrim, and then there were like other, like sub Ikrim, so to speak. But there were 3 main Ikrim, Rabbi Yosef Alba says. Okay? So the Malbim here, he doesn't quote Rabbi Yosef Alba, but it's interesting. He says what Rus is committing to, he says, I'll read it, it's one line, he says, Ubidvareha Eila, and with these words, when Rus commits to stay with Naomi, Galsa ki kvar nechonim biliba kol yisodei ha'amuna. She demonstrates that what is clear to her are all of the fundamental core values of Emunah, of Yiddishkeit, which are what? And these are the 3 Ikrim of the Rabbi Yosef Alba. Okay, what are his 3 Ikrim? Mitzias Hashem va'achduso, kemo shekasav elokayach elokai. Right, belief in God. That's one. He says we can't get at that. Right, God. What's the second one? The divinity of the Torah. Torah's Yisrael, Uman Higehem, and the Nevi'im, right? Kemo shekasuv, it says, Ba'asher telchi elech. The way you go, I will go, meaning the path you follow, right? The people you listen to, the guides you take, I will follow that as well, because I trust the Nevi'im and the Torah. And number 3 is the schar, reward and punishment. Schar v'onesh, reward and punishment, the concept of olam haba. And where she says, "Ba'ashir tamusi amos v'sham kaver," right? I will die where you die, meaning I will accept any punishments that come after. So those are the 3 Ikrim according to Rabbi Yosef Alba, which Rus again affirms here, right? Belief in God, belief in the divinity of the Torah, and belief in reward and punishment. Okay. Correct, she does. So that's why it's the Malbim points this out. The Malbim said the question was she said she doesn't just say that, she says more than that. So that is why, but because of what Ari's saying, that's why the Gemara actually goes through every part of what Naomi says to Rus and Rus's responses, and the Gemara says that Naomi was actually like trying to push her away on many different facets of Judaism. And Rus is responding to each one, right? Which is where the Gemara sees that. The Gemara says there's not just 3 things here. There's a lot more, which is, I think, where Chazal got that from. That I'll just read it from the sheet here. Not, don't have to look at it inside, but the first thing she says, right? She says, you want to join Judaism? There's a concept of tchum on Shabbos. You can't go walk very far out. So Rus says, "Ba'asher telchi elech." Wherever you walk, I'll walk. I won't go past the tchum on Shabbos. And then Naomi says to her, Asir lan yichud. There's a concept of yichud in the Torah. There's going to be laws about who you can and can't be alone with. And she says, Ba'asher talini alim, where you sleep, I'll sleep. Right? I'll be guided by those. And she says, we have 613 mitzvahs. Rus responds, Amech ami. Your nation is mine. I'm bored. 613, I can do it. Then she says, Asir lan avodas kochavim. We have all these mitzvahs. One of them specifically is no avodah zarah. Right? So you come from a pagan culture of Moab. She says, Ve'elohayech Elohai. Your God is my God. And then she says, Arba misos nimsaru lebezdin. Not only do we have all these mitzvos and you can't do certain things, there's consequences too. Right? There are 4 capital punishments that the Beis Din will impose. So she says, Ba'asher tamusi amus. Where you die, however you die, so to speak, I will die. I accept that upon myself. And then she says, Beis kvarim nimsaru lebezdin. There are 2 kvarim. There are 2 places where Beis Din buries people, right? Depending on what type of capital punishment they got. They had 2 cemeteries. So she says, V'sham kaver. I accept that as well. That's where Chazal, I think, see that, which again is the concept of, this is where the Gemara says, when a person comes to convert, you're supposed to give them a smattering of the mitzvos and try to, explain to them, not the whole Torah, we can't do that all at once, but we give them a taste of what certain mitzvos are, and it comes from here. That Naomi is saying certain things to Rus, and Rus is responding, no, I accept and I want to do. One more pasuk, and I'll take any final questions. Pasuk Yud Ches. So this really stops the next segment is 3 psukim, but we'll stop here. This segment of the trip. Vatera, and she sees ki misametzes hi laleches ita. Misametzes means she's like, she has like the strength of character. Right? We say chazak ve'ematz. The Malbim says chazak is like physical strength, ematz is like emotional fortitude, we would say. Misametzes hi laleches ita. Naomi sees that Rus is strong, right, in her commitment. Vatechda ledaber elaha. And she stops pushing her, which is where Chazal say, right, we tell the ger, we try to push the ger back, but after 3 times the ger remains committed. We allow the ger in. So one interesting thing here, and then we'll stop for questions. It says she saw ki misametzes ki lalechasita, that Rus was strong to go with her. One of the Mefarshim says the pshat is the other way around. Vatera, she saw, Naomi saw, ki misametzes hi, that she was strong, meaning that Naomi was strong. In what sense? That she realized at that moment everything was gone. Elimelech was gone, Machlon and Kilion were gone, right? Everything was gone. And one must wonder, some of the Mefarshim say, like she's thinking, like, why am I still here? Like, why? She already said, Yatsa bi yad Hashem. Hashem was like, the whole family went down, and she's the only one remaining. So he says, Ki misametzes hi, she realized she was granted some kind of, Hashem imbued her with some kind of imutz, some kind of strength, laleches ita, to be able to go together with Rus. Right? Which I was thinking about that, because I think sometimes in life we have this. You know, the Pashup shot is she sees that Rus is really strong. And this pshat is saying, no, she realized on her own that Hashem granted her some kind of internal strength to withstand everything in life, and perhaps she realized maybe this is the reason now, because there's something going further here. Rus is like the link for my family to go further, and I can help that happen. So I was thinking that like in life sometimes you have both of those, right? Sometimes like, I don't know if you ever have this, like there are these people that like we look up to them, like we love being around them, like we get so much chizuk from them, you know? And sometimes I wonder, sometimes we think like they're doing a lot for us, but perhaps really we don't even notice it, but we're doing things for them that we don't even realize, right? You know, like there's that person you look up to, and you don't realize that, you know, you look up to the Rav gives you so much chizuk, and you don't realize you're living the life, you're doing things, and the Rav is going around saying, my congregants, you don't realize they're such wonderful people. I get so much chizuk from them, right? It's like, it's the flip side. You see both of those. Yeah. Rob, yeah.
Lots of things. It's all from Hashem. For some reason, a lot of people I grew up with, I don't know why. I got to see, there was a nice lifestyle, but a lot of the other people, maybe they saw it, but they didn't give, but Ruth and Ruth went,
And they were saying they chose to go the other way.
Yeah, and then what you were saying, like in business, and I think it says at some point in the Torah, in business, some people, it looks like they've got that golden touch. I mean, there's some business guys that everything that they went for was very successful, and then other people, everything they went for kind of
tanked.
So it's different things off of my shop.
Yep.
So when
Yeah.
basically Naomi says basically to Rose, basically follow your sister. She went to her God. You should go follow her. Is she technically allowed to say that? Because you're not allowed to like tell a person to go to her Lord's heart.
Baruch Shekivan, beautiful. So the question here from Tzvi was, yeah. So his question was, Naomi says to Rus, go back and because Arpa went back to her gods, so go back and follow her. So she's telling her to go back. So how can you say that? How can you tell someone to go against Judaism and back? She does. She says in Pasuk Tezvav, she says, Shava Yevimtech, your sister-in-law returned, El Amma, to her nation, Ve'el Elohel, and to her gods, Shuvi Achrei Yevimtech, go follow her. So we said last week, the Akedas Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak Arama, who lived in the 1400s, he wrote like a Pirush on Chumash. He also wrote a Pirush on Sefer Rus. So he asks your question, and he uses that to say that he says, based on that, it's very hard to believe that they were converted at that point. Because if they really were converted, that means they were Jewish, and Naomi is telling them what?
That basically will not go up.
She's inciting them to go back. And how could you do such a thing? So he uses your question as a proof. He says that in his mind, that was a proof that they were not converted yet. Because that's nothing wrong to tell someone who's on the line, tell someone, yeah, just go back, don't convert, don't go through with it.
No, even not to be not tell them that he's breaking one shipment to say no.
Ah, that's a good question. Okay, I have to think about that. Right? His question was, even if they weren't Jewish, how was that permissible? Because she's telling them to go, right? So that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, she doesn't say go worship the God. She says, right, go follow after her. So I don't know if that's, right? I mean, if you say like, go live there, that might imply that they're going to do other stuff. I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not sure. Like if you don't directly tell them, go worship the God. She's saying she made this choice. Why don't you just go follow her and go back home? So I don't know if that would be different or maybe somehow that is problematic. That's a good point. I have to look into that. Okay, very good. So next week we'll pick up with the end of the first paragraph.
Bring a large sapphire. Sounds like a good idea.
That'd be amazing, man.
Yeah. Bring them on Zoom. They have what